Hi, this is Julie Campbell for Two Peas in a Bucket, and today I wanted to show you how you can make three very distinctive card styles using the same stamp. We'll be using a stamp from Unity Stamp Company called Call Me. It's been co-branded with Webster's Pages, along with Crate Paper's Emma Shop 6x6 pad. The first card that we'll be making today is in the more fun and cute style category, so I selected some patterned paper from the Emma Shop collection pad, and then I've also got a cream A2 size card base to go along with that. The first thing that you're going to need to do is die cut your pattern paper. I use a circle nestability die to die cut mine, but you could also use a large circle punch, or if you don't have either, you could also trace just a circular design onto the paper and cut it out freehanded. So just run this through your die cutting machine, allowing some of the die to hang off of the edge, and that will leave you with a piece that looks something like this. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to round the corners just to soften up the card a little bit. And then I'm going to also do the two left corners of the card base. Alright, then I'm just going to take a piece of cream satin ribbon and tie that around the pattern paper piece. Tie that into a bow and then just kind of fuss with it until you get it exactly how you want it. I'm just going to trim the edges off, or the ends off of the ribbon. And then I'm just going to add a little adhesive to the back of the pattern paper and apply it to the card base. Get that straight there. Alright, then the next step, we're going to be taking our rubber stamp and we're going to be inking the stamp in two different colors. So to make this a little bit easier on myself, I'm just going to cover up the word me with a little post-it note. And this is some black ink from Jenny Bolin by Ranger. I'm just going to ink up that telephone. And as you can see, this post-it note protected the bottom of my stamp from becoming all inked. So you can just peel that off, and then just carefully, you can kind of see how far you're inking up. I'm going to ink the bottom of the stamp, the word me, in red. And then you just center that in the circle that you've cut. See if I can show you that. So there we have a two-tone card. And then just to dress it up a little bit, I had a couple of buttons that I've stitched together. I just strung some crochet thread through this, and then I'm just going to tie that through my bow just to add a little to the fun and cute style. Let's see if I can do this here. And then you can just snip the ends off of your thread. Alright, and there you have a very simple, fun, and cute card. Okay, for our second card, we'll be making a masculine card with a clean and graphic feel. So I selected this wood grain paper that's from the same paper pad, and we'll ink up our stamp again. This time I'm going to be using Versamark watermark ink, which is basically, it leaves a sticky impression after you stamp it, which makes it ideal for heat embossing. So you'll be able to see this image show up once I apply the black embossing powder. So you can just cover that image up and then tap off the extra. One trick that I've learned, if you take a dryer sheet and run that across your paper before you heat emboss, it removes a lot of the static cling so you don't get little fingerprints, or your image actually stays more crisp that way. Then I'm just going to take my heat tool and heat this until it melts. And I like to heat from the top and then switch and heat from the bottom. It kind of helps with the warping of the paper. It evens everything out so you don't get a lumpy, bumpy piece of pattern paper. Alright, that looks like it's all heated. And then we'll be using this Tim Holtz ruler and an ink pen. We're just going to be making a border around the card. Let's see. I want to do this. So I'm just going to line that up at the bottom of my pattern paper. Let's see. I'm just going to draw a line here. And then we're just going to follow that line around the card. And then you just want to stop before you get into the image that you've stamped. Alright, then I'm just going to mount this onto some black cardstock. And I'm going to apply that to a craft card base. And there you have it. You can't get much simpler than that. But I really like the style. It's hard to come up with cards for men sometimes, so this is a very easy, simple way to do that. Okay, for our last card, we'll be making a Shabby Chic vintage style card. So I've went ahead and die cut a piece of ivory cardstock from a Nestabilities Label 3 die, and then to give it a little bit of an antique feel, I used some of the malted milk ink from Jenny Bolin, and then just sponge that all around the edge of my die cut panel. So we're going to stamp onto this panel, but instead of using ink, this time we'll be using some of the Jenny Bolin paints. So I've selected, this is chewing gum and stick candy that we'll be using, so I'm just going to dab some of the pink paint onto the telephone area. You don't need a lot of paint, but just try to get your image covered. And then for the word me, I'm just going to use some of this green paint. Okay. And then just stamp that, center that onto your panel and stamp that. Just try to hold steady pressure and don't move your hand back and forth. That'll help the paint from smearing. And then I'm just going to use my heat tool to try to dry that a little quicker. Alright, then I've die cut a piece of craft cardstock using a circle nestability die, and we're going to mount the stamped image onto this using some dimensional adhesive. I just like using this. It adds a lot of texture, depth. It's very easy to do. Peel off those backs here. And this die centers perfectly with the circle nestability dies. I've cut a piece of 4x4 card, actually it's going to be a 4x4 cardstock base that we'll be using, and then I've also cut a piece of Emma shop paper down to size, and then I've taken my sewing machine and stitched around the edges. And if you've never done this before, basically it's just like sewing fabric. You don't have to change the needle, you don't have to change any of the settings. It just works exactly as it would for a fabric, and it's just a nice way to add some of that vintage flair to your projects. So I'm going to be taking the malted milk ink pad and just going around the edges. It'll bring out the stitching also, because it darkens it in areas. Okay, so we're going to adhere this panel onto our card base. And then I'm going to be using some of the malted milk paint. Just go around the edges. Gives it more of a shabby chic feel to it. You can also do this with a light colored, like a white or cream ink. But I really like these paint dabbers. They work really well. So that was quick and easy. And then I have some really beautiful Maya Road ribbon that we're going to adhere to the bottom of this pattern paper panel. And then the last thing, we're just going to apply some adhesive to the back of our stamped image. Just only apply adhesive to the bottom half of this circle, because as you'll see, the top half is going to extend over the card base. Alright. And there's our final card, the Shabby Chic Vintage Style card.